One decision and the world catches fire. Watch the map change, the stakes rise, and the next few minutes explain the 20 choices that decided World War II. This isn't a list of battles, it's a chain reaction. Leaders, soldiers, scientists, and citizens making calls under pressure that reshaped everything after. Every half minute, a turning point. By the end, World War II will make dangerous sense, and you'll see the pattern that runs through it. After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles punished more than it rebuilt. Reparations and redrawn borders didn't just end a war, they planted the next one. Humiliation mixed with economic collapse made simple answers sound wise and strongmen look like saviors. The takeaway is simple. Resentment isn't background, it's kindling. Control the story. Control the choices. The Nazi regime mastered radio, rallies, and film, converting grievance into a political machine. Culture was coordinated, slogans sharpened, enemies named. Dictatorship didn't arrive overnight. It was sold steadily in catchy packages. Whoever frames the problem often wins the solution. Appeasement follows. In 1938, Britain and France ceded parts of Czechoslovakia, hoping to avoid war. They weren't fools. They were underarmed and haunted by fresh memories of trenches and gas masks. But the message Berlin heard was louder. Push, and the door opens. Not now can be mistaken for yes. Then the shocker. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Rivals Germany and the Soviet Union promise not to attack each other and secretly agree to slice up Eastern Europe. Stalin buys time. Hitler dodges a two-front nightmare. The runway to invasion is cleared by signatures and secrecy. Deals with devil's work. Until they don't. Poland is next. September 1st, 1939. Germany unleashes a blitz of armour and aircraft. Movement coordinated by radio and fuel. Britain and France declare war. But in the West, the front goes oddly quiet. For now. The lightning in Blitzkrieg is logistics with speed, radios that connect, fuel that flows, roads that hold. France bets on stone and is beaten by speed. Trusting the Maginot Line, planners left the Ardennes forest thinly guarded, calling it impassable for tanks. In May 1940, German columns burst through, outflanking fortresses built for the last war. Paris falls in weeks. Yesterday's perfect defence becomes tomorrow's trapdoor. Britain's choice lands like a gauntlet. Stand and evacuate. At Dunkirk, a trapped army is ferried home from the beaches. It's not victory, it's survival. But survival is strategy when it preserves a fighting core. Britain refuses to make peace. That single decision keeps a beacon lit for everything that follows. The Battle of Britain turns skies into a verdict. The UK invests in radar, ground control, and trained pilots, an integrated system that makes every minute count. Germany shifts from hitting airfields to hitting cities, a change that gives the RAF precious time. Systems beat heroics, networks beat brute force. The Mediterranean becomes a pivot. Control the Suez Canal and oil routes, or lose your lifeline. Germany races with daring but thin supplies. Britain leans into convoys, maintenance, and attrition. At El Alamein, momentum stalls the Axis advance. Professionals talk logistics. Amateurs talk tactics. Then the fatal overreach, Operation Barbarossa. In June 1941, Hitler invades the Soviet Union, betting on a quick collapse. Distance and weather answer with mud, snow, and endless rail lines. Moscow doesn't fall. Soviet factories shift east. Armies regroup. Invading a continent-sized country demands a plan for winter and for factories beyond the horizon. Across the Pacific comes a different gamble. Pearl Harbor. Japan strikes to neutralize the US Pacific Fleet and secure a resource empire. Carriers survive and the attack forges American unity. Winning a morning can lose a war if it chooses your opponent for you. Midway flips momentum with information. US codebreakers coax Japan into confirming AF as the target. Ambush set. Carriers waiting. 4 Japanese carriers go down in days. Intelligence becomes a weapon you can't see, yet it hits as hard as torpedoes. Stalingrad turns a city into a verdict on ego and endurance. Hitler insists on taking the city with Stalin's name. The Soviets decide to hold at any cost, then encircle. By early 1943, a German army surrenders in a frozen ruin. Ego is often a strategy, just not for the side that holds it. Factories become front lines. The arsenal of democracy retools. Ships, planes, and trucks pour off standardized lines. Women and minorities join industries in new numbers. Schedules run around the clock. Quantity becomes a quality all its own. Wars are won in assembly lines as much as on front lines. Under the Atlantic lies a chess match. U-boats try to choke Britain into submission. The Allies stack technology, radar, sonar, depth charges, add escort carriers and crack codes. Convoys tighten. Losses drop. No single gadget saves you. Layered networks do. Strategic bombing poses a brutal question. Morale or machines? The suffering is vast and morally fraught. But when oil refineries, rail hubs, and ball-bearing plants are systematically targeted, an enemy's capacity to wage war begins to seize up. Target selection is ethics plus arithmetic, and both matter. The soft underbelly of Europe proves more granite than butter. Sicily and Italy are invaded to knock out an Axis partner and tie down German divisions. It works, but progress is slow, the terrain punishing. A secondary front can be strategically decisive, even if it's tactically miserable. D-Day is a story of weather, deception, and nerve. A narrow window opens in early June 1944. The Allies sell a believable lie that the main landing will hit elsewhere. Then they cross the Channel. Once ashore, it's a grind. That morning, the best weapon wasn't a tank. It was a story the enemy believed. In the east, the Red Army turns into a steamroller. Operation Bagration in summer 1944 annihilates a German army group in Belarus, timed to the western landings in France. When fronts synchronize, effects multiply. Pressure in one theatre shatters resistance in another. Desperation brings the Battle of the Bulge. In December 1944, Hitler gambles on a surprise winter offensive through the Ardennes. The line bends, not breaks. Fuel runs thin, defenders hold, reinforcements pivot. Surprise is perishable, logistics expire faster. Behind the lines, total war becomes an everyday routine. Ration books, war bonds, victory gardens, second shifts. The term isn't just rhetoric, it's a million small choices in kitchens and workshops that move armies you never see. Every sandwich saved, every spare part machined is strategy. In quiet rooms, math fights back. Code breakers and spies intercept, exploit and sabotage. A decrypted message diverts a convoy around a wolf pack. A small team destroys a crucial bridge. Invisible victories compound, shortening campaigns and saving lives that never know it. And at the moral centre, the darkest decision. The industrialised murder of millions of Jews and other targeted groups in the Holocaust. This was not a byproduct of war. It was a policy built with trains, lists, and bureaucracies. To remember it accurately is not optional. It is the warning label history paid for in blood. The Allies commit to unconditional surrender. The clarity stiffens some enemies, but prevents later myths of betrayal and stab-in-the-back stories that poison a peace. Clear end states shape how wars end, and how peace holds together afterward. In the Pacific, island hopping avoids strongholds and seizes airfields, shrinking bomber ranges and tightening the noose. You don't have to batter every fortress. You can make some irrelevant. Each captured runway shortens the next leap. A blockade and fire from the sky squeeze Japan. Submarines strangle trade and supply. B-29s rip into industry and cities. Civilian suffering is immense, and the debate over means and ends grows louder as the war's end draws nearer. Strategy always carries a human bill. Then the new physics of power arrives. The Manhattan Project races a nightmare. What if the enemy gets there first? Atomic bombs are used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to force surrender without an invasion that could kill millions more. Japan announces surrender soon after. Technology compresses time and expands ethical weight. The signatures come next. Germany capitulates in May 1945. Japan formally surrenders in September aboard a battleship deck. The fighting ends on paper, but the decisions forged in those years keep echoing far beyond the parades and photographs. What changed forever? The United Nations forms to replace fragile diplomacy with something sturdier. Empires crack and decolonization accelerates. A Cold War begins, with nuclear deterrence looming over every calculation. Many nations expand welfare states. Technology leaps ahead. A modern vocabulary for human rights gains teeth. The map changes, but so does the mental model. Collective security, international law, and vigilance against totalitarianism. Look closer for the final domino. Ordinary choices. A factory foreman who retools a line overnight. A cryptanalyst who guesses a synonym that unlocks a cipher. A family who hides a neighbour at unthinkable risk. Enough small decisions stack up to tip history. We tell the story of generals and ministers, but the hinge often sits in a quiet room, or a quiet act of courage. So step back and see the pattern. Punishment versus reconstruction. Propaganda versus truth. Appeasement versus deterrence. Pact versus principle. Speed versus supply. Fortresses versus forests. Survival versus surrender. Radar versus raids. Daring versus diesel. Overreach versus reality. Surprise versus strategy. Code versus carriers. Ego versus encirclement. Factory versus frontline. Wolf packs versus networks. Morale versus machines. Soft underbelly versus hard mountains. Deception versus defense. Synchronization versus collapse. Last punch versus last fuel. The same tension repeats. Systems thinking wins. Logistics, information, alliances, and clear objectives beat improvised bravado almost every time. Why does it still matter? Because today's crises rhyme with yesterday's. Information wars, supply chains, alliances, deterrence, refugees, moral clarity. None of this is antique. If this story did its job, you don't just know what happened. You can spot the next domino before it falls. Narratives shape choices. Logistics outrun slogans. Alliances amplify power. Ethics isn't extra. It's the compass you check before you move. If you want more decisions that decided history, tell me which moment to unpack next. The Midway Code trick, Stalingrad's encirclement, or the quiet system that saved Britain in 1940. See the system. Make the choice.